So, can you please give us a definition of MAP training?
Sure. So MAP stands for mental and physical. And the program is, I call it a brain fitness program because we've demonstrated that it's really good for enhancing the fitness of our brain. The mental training is a form of meditation called focused attention meditation. So it's a kind of, kind of a serious meditation. It's a way of like focusing your attention on your breath and not letting your thoughts travel around, while you're meditating. So it's difficult to do, but it's very effective for changing the brain. Mm-hmm. And then the meditation, which is 30 minutes long in total, is followed immediately by the physical training. And the physical training is aerobic exercise. So that's where people get their heart rate up into the so-called aerobic zone. Meaning, aerobic means oxygen. So you want to get more oxygen to your brain. The brain uses like 20% of the oxygen that we breathe in, even though it only accounts for a couple percentage points of our body weight. So the brain really thrives on oxygen. So the best way to get oxygen to your brain is through aerobic exercise, really. And that's why it's so effective, right? Exercise in changing our brain. So this combination of combining mental training where you're really focusing your attention and then following immediately by aerobic exercise, the physical training, we've shown in like numerous studies to be super beneficial for many things, for trauma thoughts, particularly for ruminations, these kind of repetitive thoughts, for brain activity, for oxygen consumption, depression, anxiety. So yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I know that you suggest the meditation and a 30 minutes minimum of exercising, right? So this is why you do that on your book.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So at some point in your book, you talk and you write about about how important it is to train our brain. Any suggestion? How can we do that?
There's many ways to train your brain. I mean, this program that I developed is very effective because it only takes an hour once or twice a week. We've done numerous studies, people doing it maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and they, show all these really remarkable changes. But of course, there's other ways to train your brain. I think the main thing, or at least one of the main things you want to do, is do something that's new, right? Because the brain also really responds to newness. So if it's, if you want to play an instrument, play a new instrument. You can play the same guitar song over and over your whole life, and that's fun and that's fine, but that's not really brain training. So maybe, learn to play the saxophone or, something that really challenges your brain to learn while you're learning a new skill. Or traveling is really good for the brain, but traveling somewhere new, somewhere where you really have to focus your attention and learn new things and maybe even, be out of your comfort zone. So I think that's one of the main things to think about when you're training the brain is have it be new. And then the second part is have it be effortful. Mm-hmm. Something that you really have to focus on. There's many things we can do that seem fun or even seem good for ourselves, and they are, in other ways, but to really train your brain, you have to do something that requires some effort. In fact, in my book, I discuss this phenomena of neurogenesis. Mm-hmm. And a neurogenesis is the production of new neurons in the brain. For many years, we didn't think that the brain made new neurons. We thought, you're born with all the neurons you'll ever get, and you have to take care of them. And that's still true. I mean, most of the neurons in your brain you've had since you were born. But there's a population of cells in the hippocampus, which we use for learning, a part of the brain, that are continually turning over. And these cells, we've discovered in my lab that they are useful for learning new things. And moreover, many of these cells die unless you learn something new. So it's kind of a use it or lose it phenomenon.
Got it.
And you know, one of the things that we discovered about these cells is that they don't respond to just any type of learning. It has to be new, right? So it has to be something novel, and it has to be effortful, meaning it requires some kind of concentration or some level of difficulty, and then you actually have to learn.
Of course.
You can't just like kind of, you know, I always tell my students it'd be like showing up for class but not paying attention.
Yeah.
You kind of think
It
you're
doesn't
learning,
count.
but you're not. Yeah.
Of course, you have to be there. You have to keep the focus on.
Yeah, be present.
Be present. It's important to be present.
Yeah, always important.
Yeah, of course. You said something very interesting about the comfort zone. It's something that really affects me and a lot of people, especially on social media platform. I'm sure you know about TikTok and the global, you know, importance that it had achieved in this time, especially during the pandemic month. I mean, during the lockdown. What do you think about this? To keep your brain in training, step out of the comfort zone, and maybe also do something that scares you. Does it work that way too? What do you think about it?
I think that's really important. In fact, I was even thinking about that a little bit today before this interview, because I was thinking, you know, all these people going on social media, myself included, kind of takes you out of your comfort zone, you know, because you're not necessarily prepared always, you know, for what you're going to post or what you're going to say. And so it kind of makes you be present, makes you kind of like show your real self. And I think that actually helps people in the future, you know, being able to like communicate maybe with your partner or your friends, like just to be a little bit more, just a little more comfortable with being present. Because I think, you know, many people, of course, are really nervous about public speaking or saying something.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So, you know, as much as people want to talk bad about social media, I think there are some really positive outcomes.
Okay. When I was reading your book, I stumbled upon a quote from Mildred Norman that I really liked. I'm gonna quote it. If you realized how powerful your thoughts are, you would never do negative thinking. It hit me a lot because I'm really passionate about the conversation taking place on the social media platform, and the positive thinking. It's something a lot of people have something to say about, and I was really in a positive way, of course, stunned that I could find it also on your book. So I wanted to go deeper about the power of positive thinking. How do you think we can learn to actually redirect our thoughts and our memories, because you talk a lot about memories as well, for achieve a better quality of life? How can we do that?
I mean, probably not surprising. I think the best, or at least one of the best ways, is to learn more about your own brain.
Sure.
You know, because I feel like people, I mean, they're interested in the brain kind of conceptually, like, oh, the brain is so interesting, it's so cool, it's amazing. Knowing exactly, like, how does the brain operate? How does it produce thoughts? How does it produce a feeling in our body? How does it orchestrate a memory? How do we, you know, relive a memory? And I do kind of feel like if you know a little bit more about how that works, I mean, we don't fully understand those processes, but we have some idea, and we know that they're orchestrated by the brain.
Sure.
So I feel like if you can learn a little bit more about that, then you can learn to kind of replace, or you don't have to necessarily prevent negative thoughts or even necessarily replace them with positive ones overtly, but just be aware of them. You know, be aware that there are these thoughts that are always changing. They come and they go, they're transient, and kind of look at them from the outside. Because most people, when they have a thought, they're like, oh my God, I have to do this. You know, I had this negative thought and it's going to make me feel sad, or it's going to bring back this bad memory. And that's, sometimes it feels like you can't control that, or you can't understand it, but you can. Because believe it or not, it takes time. It takes time to go from a thought to a memory, and then to generate a feeling.
Yeah.
You know, it could take tens of milliseconds or hundreds of milliseconds, which is imperceptible in our everyday life. But if you kind of realize it, like, well, I don't need, every time I have that thought, I don't necessarily have to let it stay in my kind of mind's eye long enough to bring up this negative feeling. Yeah. And you know, as I'm sure you're aware, and I talk a little bit about in my book, some therapies really do focus on that, kind of like changing the negative thoughts, replacing them with more positive ones. You know, some of these skills have to be learned through therapy. And then others are just almost unconsciously learned. So for example, like during MAP training, you know, we find that people don't ruminate as much afterwards. They don't have these negative thoughts about themselves and their life. But we don't tell people, you know, stop ruminating. We don't say anything really about it, but we assume that people are just kind of learning a little bit more about their brain. They're kind of associating maybe the meditation with being relaxed, you know, so they have negative thoughts maybe while they're meditating, but they're in a relaxed state, their heart is not beating fast. And so then they learn, oh, just because I had this negative thought doesn't mean, you know, my heart is going to start racing.
Of course, it doesn't mean anything. It's just
doesn't mean anything.
Thought,
it's just a thought. It's just a thought.
Wow.
There's another really interesting title of a book. I think I actually put this in my book too, but it was called Thoughts Are Not the Enemy. I think that's the title of the book exactly. But I thought that was like a really great, also a great title.
Yes, it is. It is, yeah. Because a lot of time it happens to me, it happens to my family and, you know, friends, that our mind actually sometimes lies to us.
Yeah.
Especially when we talk about memories. Just like a week ago, I was talking with my mother and father about something that they did to me when I was little. It was something that I had a certain memory of the situation. So I was talking about it with them, and they both, two against one, they told me it didn't happen this way. This happened. So we had a little confrontation about it. It was something really silly about, I remember that I touched the glass of water, I didn't do it. And they told me, you don't remember quite well. It didn't happen. So I thought, okay, that's weird, because I was so sure that situation happened in that way that I used to remember. Then when they both told me it didn't, I was stunned. I was, oh, what are you thinking? My brain, it didn't happen. So yeah, it's, of course, I think we will never be able to understand completely how our brain works. And maybe that's the thing that it's more fascinating about it. Probably. Yeah. I don't know, you know, the mystery about it.
I agree. So when I was young, I thought we would figure this all out by the time I got to be the age I am.
How did it go?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't. It's kind of disappointing, but I guess to some extent, it does still make it exciting to think about.
It's an adventure.
Yeah.
I have a last question about the female world, because you write in your book that women are more vulnerable to stress and to traumatic events. How is that so?
We don't really exactly know why, but definitely the case that women are much more likely to be diagnosed with depression, like at least twice or 3 times as likely. They're almost 3 times as likely to be diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They're much more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety disorders. Obviously, eating disorders are much more prevalent in women than men. So the mental illnesses that are associated with stress and to some extent trauma are always more prevalent in women than in men. You know, why that is hard to say. It's probably not just one thing. For example, we know that hormones are important.
Sure.
Because these sex differences don't arise until women go through puberty. So if you look at some of these statistics prior to puberty, boys and girls have the same amounts. But then when they go through puberty is when the females, show higher prevalence. So hormones are definitely important. We know that mood changes, across the menstrual cycle. It can change with pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, etc. So hormones are always kind of modulating our mood and affecting, how we respond to stress and trauma. There's cultural differences, right? The way that women are treated, the way we're seen, the roles that we play. I don't have to go into all of those details, but it's pretty obvious what they are.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, even if we are in 2023, women are seen like the fragile sex. I don't know if you use this concept, but here in Italy, it's something really depressing, actually, because women delicate? What? That's not really true. For sure, also because of all these hormones that we have. Just think about the 9 months of pregnancy. A man will never and could never do that. Because we are different, of course, we are different. I mean, the female body, it's different from the male body. That's nature. But it doesn't make us more fragile or more delicate. We are just more sensitive. And that's probably why we are also more sensible to, stress or traumatic events. Maybe, I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, we just play through evolution, right, a different role, and so we're different, and our brains are different. I mean, I studied sex differences in the brain, decades ago, and at the time it wasn't really, I don't know, it was kind of like a side thing, and if you're like, oh, sex differences, I don't know if those are really accurate or true. And of course now I can't open up a journal without a paper showing something about sex differences in the brain. So, our bodies look different, we act different, we talk different. So obviously our brains are going to be different. Yeah. They are, in part because of hormones and genetics and anatomy, but then also just because of our experience, because our experience changes our brain. So, one of the topics that I'm particularly passionate about, and I've been studying for quite some time, is sexual trauma and how that affects the female brain. Because we know that women, 1 in 3 women will experience some kind of physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And that's a lot of women. And that's what we know about, what can be detected in studies. So that also has an effect on women's and men too, who it happens to, mood, their response to stress, how they feel, how comfortable they are in the world, so I think that's a big component too for these effects. In fact, one of the reasons I developed MAP Train My Brain, this brain fitness program, was to help women who have these, that are ruminating a lot or feel depressed or feel anxious, and in particular, any kind of trauma that they've had. That was my goal. And in fact, we're doing a study right now looking at women in a brain scan to see how MAP training affects them. And those particular women have had sexual trauma. And in just 6 weeks of training, their PTSD symptoms went down by like 40%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So it's really effective. You know, it's just getting people to do it in a way.
That's the hard part.
It is.
Getting people to do something.
Yeah, like, you know, intellectually this will help me, but then you have to actually do it.
Yeah, just do it. We're not sponsoring Nike here, by the way.
I did just actually develop a course, online course. So if anybody's interested, it's at maptrainmybrain.com, and it's just an online course. Someone can take it. It's, you know, 6 weeks long, and it's just a way to make it accessible, you know, so that people, if they're interested, can try it.
Yeah, of course, it's important to do that.
Yeah, just, you know, you have to put it out there and hope that, you know, people will understand how important it is to take care of our brain. Like, not after something happens. I mean, that's good too. If something bad happens, you know, to get therapy or help, but also for the future. Like, keep your brain kind of prepared for what's going to happen in the future.
Of course, also because I feel that right now we also have the tools to do that, to try, because of course you will never prevent or foresee our a tragic event, unfortunately.
No.
But we have the tools to do something before.
Yeah.
So we can train ourselves to train our brain, and that's the important, and that's what everyday trauma is about.
Yeah.
So just one little thing, when you say ruminating, do I catch it well? I mean, are you talking about overthinking?
Overthinking is a little bit broader than rumination. Okay. And it's not necessarily like a clinical term per se, overthinking. So like overthinking just means thinking too much about all kinds of things, and you feel like your head is just filled with thoughts, and then a kind of a subcategory of that could be rumination. So ruminations are repetitive thoughts. They're a form of memory, actually. So you have these thoughts or a thought, and then you kind of get all the information from the thought that you can. And then before you know it, you're thinking the very same thought. And then a little bit later, you have the same thought and the same thought. And, you know, these thoughts are usually negative.
Sure.
Like, and they usually have some kind of blame or regret, like, oh, if I hadn't, you know, gone to that party, or if I hadn't said this, then that wouldn't have happened. So they're kind of replaying something in our lives that we feel bad about or have some regret. And so, yeah, and the other thing that's really kind of bad about these kind of thoughts is that they create more memories in your brain. Because when you have a negative thought and it brings back a memory, that memory comes into this moment. And then you create another memory of that experience.
Yeah.
So when you're ruminating, particularly about something bad that has happened in your life or something that you're thinking, you're kind of just filling your brain, you know, with these memory traces. So that's partly why I think ruminations are so important to understand and maybe decrease. They're super highly correlated with depression, anxiety, stress, trauma. So like they're kind of like a proxy almost for mental health. And that's why I think they're so important to like I said, to understand, but also to try to stop or at least reduce them.
Sure. Also because you can't cope with something you can't understand. You have to analyze what's going on, and then you can, try to fix it. So it's important, like you said earlier, to be present and to be focused on the matter.
Exactly, because when you're ruminating, you're not doing something else. I mean, we could kind of really only do one thing at a time. And in fact, this is what we're testing now in the brain imaging machine, because we have these hypotheses, like there's a ruminating kind of circuit That's used when people are ruminating. They're using like certain parts of their brain over and over and over, and then, at least theoretically, they're not able to access these other parts that you need to be present, to learn something new, to be excited about the future, to be planning, and like you say, also to be kind of learning from what happened.